Hello and welcome back to another KCC video. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today we're gonna jump into a brand new subreddit for KCC, Neighbors from Hell. Our first story comes to us from ULFR. Neighbor gets expensive smart home appliances installed on Wi-Fi with no password. Calls the police when I let them know that's bad. Let's jump right in. Hi all, I remembered this story from a year or two ago while I was browsing for a spotlight I could turn on and off from my phone. Not related to the story, but my dog wants to go to war with some foxes who keep accidentally turning the motion-activated spotlight, which Fuzzface considers dire provocation. I was farting around with a crappy laptop's Wi-Fi card and saw I had an access point I could connect to that wasn't there before. Signal was so-so and I had my own internet, so I didn't bother trying to use that one, so I sorta just forgot about it. About a week later, I was unplugging some stuff and accidentally unplugged my wireless router, and while it was unplugged, my phone found the next accessible Wi-Fi access point, which was the one I'd found previously and not really bothered with. Not my circus, not my monkeys, you know? Then my phone pops up saying I need to install all of these smart home apps to make the appliances work, which didn't make sense. I'm enough of an IT guy to know that unless there's a burning need for it, home automation isn't really the best idea. Absolutely no telling who can access that information. These people had their garage doors, heating and air conditioning, lights, interior and exterior, televisions and refrigerator hooked up to a Wi-Fi with no password. In the industry, we call that dumb as a bag of hammers. Once I plugged the router back in to appease the suddenly irate family members wondering where the internet went, I hooked up my dog and took him for a walk. Before I left the house, I installed the smart home app and turned on one exterior spotlight and then looked for the house it was attached to. Presumably, if I was able to use their Wi-Fi, they were in line of sight. Once I saw the light that was on, I turned it off to make sure. House was on the next street over directly behind my house. There's a huge hill in the way that the builders left because Mother Nature didn't flatten my part of the country as a courtesy, so lots can be next to each other without being accessible. That meant going the long way around. My dog is an adorable 35-pound cockapoo who has much better people skills than I do. When I have to go talk to people I don't know, he comes along because he's about as threatening as a wet noodle. Don't tell him I said that. And I can't be that bad a man if my dog is as awesome as he is. OP provided some dog tax, so here it is. So we make our way over to the neighbor's house and I knock on their door. A nice older lady answers it, old enough to have moved out kids, but not old enough to be considered a Q-tip in my humble opinion. She forgets to ask what I want and immediately goes gooey all over my dog. And her husband hears the adorable appreciation sounds coming from his front door and investigates. He too is floored by my dog's awesomeness. There's about a minute of him getting all the attention, and I thought building a rapport before I remembered why I'm here. I ask how they like their new smart home stuff, and they immediately start to get weirded out. Husband says, "We like it just fine. How do you know we got that stuff? Please don't take this the wrong way, but you don't have a password on your wireless? My phone connected to it by accident and told me about all the stuff you had installed." Wife cocks her head to one side and husband's brow starts developing a thunderous quality. I start talking faster. "I'm just here to let you know that you really should put a password on your Wi-Fi or anyone can use it to do stuff like open your garage doors." Husband's brow is now in full fury mode and he opens his mouth to presumably shout at me, but before he can, the wife says, "Oh, that's what the installer guy was talking about. He kept saying I needed to encrypt the thingy or something like that. We've never bothered with a password because it's a pain in the butt to set up and remember." Husband has gone from thunderous fury to bewilderment and he looks at his wife and says, "Encrypt the what now?" I don't feel like getting voluntold to set up these people's network and appliances for them, so I say, "Okay, gotta go, bye." I power walk away from their house and once clear, we mosey back towards my house. About 2 hours later, someone starts knocking up the front door to my house. I live in an in-law apartment in the basement of my parents' house, so that's not my door. My mother answers the door and then stomps down to the door to my part of the house, throws it open, and tells me the police are here again in a frosty voice. I hustle up the stairs and there's Officer Dave, not his real name, but the only officer my town at that point had who knew enough about computers to actually have a conversation with me without getting a must-smash nerd face. I said, "Hi Dave, what's..." He cuts me off before I can even finish. "You promised me you were done with this crap after that whole Main Street thing. You effing promised, and now I look like a butthole." Whoever had set up the timing on the stoplights for the main road through my town after some pretty serious construction did an absolutely awful job, and traffic was horrific. Me and a locksmith friend decided to fix the problem. After reporting the problem to town hall got nowhere. We didn't break anything, he picked the lock and I hacked the light, and then we locked up when we were done. We got caught on the last light. Only reason I didn't go to jail was because Dave backed me up and made everyone wait a day to see if traffic was better, which it was. I then promised him no more shenanigans. "What? I haven't done anything," says I. "Then why the hell am I getting calls about you opening and closing people's garage doors and turning their lights on and off?" To be fair, that did sound like the sort of thing I do, not to break into someone's house, just to mess with them. I'm mischievous, not evil. And then the light dawns. I point and ask, "Did you get called by the people living in that house? Because I went over there a little while ago to tell them that they needed to put a password on their Wi-Fi. Only thing I did was turn on a spotlight to see which house it was. Nothing more than that, swear to God. They don't have a password?" There's a thud as Dave facepalms. I let out a yup in sympathy. He sighs and says, "Stay out of trouble," and I wave bye. Turns out the husband called the police and gave a vague description of me and the dog and said I lived nearby, and one of the other cops gave Dave a hard time about him cutting me slack before he drove out to talk to me. The couple got a call back to tell them the issue is resolved and please secure your Wi-Fi. 2 days later, there's a password on their Wi-Fi, and we all lived happily ever after, except for getting the stank eye from that couple whenever I walked by. As someone who's done a lot of tech support over the phone talking with older people who have absolutely no clue what's going on with electronics, yeah, I just don't want to volunteer anymore. Make the odd exception for my parents here and there, but when it comes to other people, it's just not worth the hassle. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our second story today comes to us from AMProxy. My neighbor is obsessed with the property line, always goes outside when I'm outside, never leaves the house to go anywhere, and has screamed at me on a few occasions. What do I do? Let's jump right in. I'm a woman in my early 30s living alone. My next door neighbor is also a woman in her early 30s living alone. We live in a typical suburban neighborhood. Long story short, I noticed pretty early on that she's obsessed with her property lines, as I witnessed her yell at another neighbor about it roughly a month or so after she moved in. At that time, I thought to myself, okay, this woman is nuts, but she's not going to become my problem because I never go anywhere near the property line. Hell, I don't even spend time outside in my own backyard because I still have to build myself a patio. So I figured I'll just be friendly with her and she'll see how chill and easygoing I am and we'll be cool with each other. Well, I was wrong. Come December, after our first big snowstorm, my plow truck driver plowed my driveway. She flipped out, telling me that some of the snow that was moved during the plow job had rolled over onto her property. Then she actually said, "I'm gonna draw a line in the snow, and if anything goes over that line, we're gonna have a problem." After that, I tried to explain to her, in a stern but polite manner, that the snow was not on her land and that I was on a work call. We both work from home. She reacted to that by marching over onto my property and screaming at me on my own front porch. She screamed bloody murder in my face in a manner I had never seen before. She demanded that I take a walk with her to examine the snow so that she could prove some of it was on her land. I was feeling pretty threatened at this point, so I said, "I'm not walking anywhere with you." Then she screamed, "Then we're going to have an effing problem. Do you understand me?" I said nothing because I was in a state of complete shock. I just stared at her in amazement. And then she leaned in and screamed this blood-curdling scream, "Do you effing understand me?" So I slammed the door in her face and decided to avoid her at all costs from then on. In the days that followed, she proceeded to shovel her driveway and the sidewalk in front of her house, even on days when there was no snow left to shovel, screaming at me and my house the entire time she's shoveling. She can see me through my window as the desk I work from faces the window. Come spring, I go for walks with my friends in the neighborhood when the weather is nice. She ran at us with a weed whacker as we passed in front of her house, screaming, "You start your walks when you think I'm inside. You can't avoid me." I filed a police report after this incident. On her more calm days, when she's not doing one of those screaming episodes, she'll go outside whenever I go outside and pretend to work on a bush that's on our property line. I hired a landscaper to cut my grass because I don't feel comfortable in my own yard. She went outside on my landscaper's first day on the job and talked to him about me. Basically, I can't do anything at my house without her reacting to it or somehow finding a way to insert herself into the situation. She makes everything her business. On her best days, she's just behaving in a nosy, annoying manner. But on her worst days, she's screaming at me and making me feel threatened, as if I'm about to be physically attacked. Oh, and she also never leaves her house to go anywhere, ever. She has her groceries and anything else she needs delivered to her house. She literally never gets into her car to drive anywhere. She is always home, waiting, watching. And before you say it, no, I'm not selling my house. I was here first, and I put so much money into renovating it to make it into my dream house. I refuse to be run out of my own neighborhood. Oh, and I'm getting a privacy fence put up next month. I don't really like the look of fences, but I don't think I'll be comfortable going into my own yard until I get one. Has anyone ever dealt with someone like this? Why is she doing all this? Is she potentially dangerous? OP added on an edit after the story. It says, "I feel dumb that I didn't mention this earlier, but yes, I did have a few cameras installed around my house right after I moved in, before she moved in, given that I'm a single woman living alone. The front camera has actually caught all the incidents that happened in the front yard, including the December screaming incident and weed whacker incident, and I have been saving and documenting everything in case I need to show it to police later on. I recently bought a new camera that will specifically focus on the property line in the backyard." There's a comment down below this story that pretty much sums everything up that OP needs to do. Number 1, get cameras, cover every angle. Number 2, get mirror reflecting film for your windows. 3, get that fence built as high as legally possible. 4, stand your ground, don't give that psychotic bee an inch. 5, keep reporting her for every harassing or violent incident and create a paper trail. Not much else I can say to wrap that one up except OP, I hope things turn out well for you. Our next story today comes to us from Fronttooth1508. Neighbor's kid and dog ruined 30 of my tulips. Let's jump right in. This all started last fall when I planted 30 tulips in the large flower bed in front of my house. Since then, I've caught my neighbor's dog running amok, digging up my bulbs. At that time, I let my neighbor know and it seemed to be handled and over with. Though, once my tulips started breaking soil, it only got worse. The little girl next door started taking the dog with her to play in my garden. Play meaning letting her dog eat my tulips while she rips apart the leaves. Once I saw this, I quickly ran outside and politely explained to her why I'm not okay with this. Again, she apologized and I thought it was handled and done. Boy, was I wrong. For the last month, the little girl and the dog have been having a free-for-all in my flower bed. Every time I catch her and run outside, she darts off like it's some kind of game. I've tried getting in touch with the parent again, but I feel as if I'm being purposely ignored. I eventually reached out to the landlord to just send a little friendly reminder out, which they did. But now I'm at my wit's end. Yesterday afternoon, I watched the little girl next door take a stick to my last standing tulips like a baseball bat, petal flying everywhere, and they all snapped at the stems. I was beside myself. I also knew I was too upset to confront anyone at that moment. Gave myself some time to cool down, and then went over to knock on the door and talk to the parent. No answer, even though I know they were home. At this point, I don't know what to do, or if there is anything I can do. Our landlord is aware of everything, except what happened yesterday. My landlord even gifted me new flowers to plant, but they also got destroyed in yesterday's reckoning. I know at the end of the day it's just flowers, but I honestly had a mental breakdown this morning when I went out to try and salvage them and realized they are all done for. All 30 of my tulips that took 6 to 7 months to bloom, destroyed. Well, OP, it's obvious that the neighbors aren't seeing the flowers the same way you do. I would speak to your landlord again because they seem to be helpful and mention the dollar value of the flowers plus the labor that you put in. Get them to make it clear to your neighbor that there's value here and they have destroyed that value. Our last story today comes to us from Nathan the Samosa. I finally won. My neighbors have been antisocial buttholes for the last 4 months. Now they're scared to breathe in their own flat. Let's jump right in. I've been waiting for this moment since our upstairs neighbors moved in mid-October. An HMO property occupied by a bunch of entitled students whose mummies and daddies were paying for rent, would scream and shout at each other, run, stomp, and jump on our roof, play bass-heavy music at all hours of the day, and have parties during a global pandemic of all times every other night. I went upstairs to open a dialogue with them the week they moved in, but they were buttholes to me from the minute they opened the door. They blamed all of my issues on the old building, as if listening to you imitate a siren at 7 a.m. is the same as hearing you turn on the tap. The more I tried to talk to them, the more hostile they got, swearing at me in hysterics and beginning to jump on my roof deliberately to get a reaction from me. Unfortunately for them, I don't play these games. I bought a decibel reader, and every time they made consistent noise above 15 decibels, even though it's police matter at plus 10, I'm generous like that, I would make a note of what I was hearing at what times and report it to the police. I contacted my landlord and had emails on record detailing that my neighbor's landlord had been made aware of their tenants' antisocial behavior. I sent emails once a week to my local authorities and HMO department detailing the events. They had guests kicked out of their flat by police on 3 different occasions. They didn't care though. They assumed it was my word against theirs and went on for months lying to the police, council, and landlord saying I was making it all up. Good thing I had 50 hours of audio recorded of them making excessive noise and deliberately trying to make my life difficult. The minute I heard from HMO enforcement, I sent an email to my landlord with just a small sample of audio clips showing them raising the sound levels in my room to those of a small auditorium or a quartet in a chamber hall. He then sent an email to my neighbor's landlord with evidence that the tenants were lying to not just her, but every authority that tried to get involved. It's been a week now and I haven't even heard someone cough. They're starting to realize that, no, it's not my word against theirs, it's my mountain of evidence and stubborn ability to stay quiet against their desperate and obvious attempts to not be held accountable. Those idiots are crapping themselves every time they make a floorboard creak, and they deserve it. For some of them, this is probably the first time in their lives they're being held accountable for something and facing the consequences of their crappy behavior. Even if HMO sees they're making zero noise now, I have all the evidence that this is only the case because authorities are getting involved. They've made it perfectly clear that it's possible to live in this building without being a butthole, and if it doesn't stay that way, I'm getting them effing evicted. Yes, I could have moved flat. Yes, I could have sent evidence earlier, but it's a matter of principle. I didn't want them to just get a slap on the wrist. I wanted to make them regret ever being a butthole to their neighbors in the first place, and it worked. I have to admit, I never even thought of getting a decibel reader to see just how much noise the idiots that used to live underneath us made. I'm not in an apartment anymore, but if anybody I know ever has problem with noise, I'm gonna recommend this to them. Check out all 4 OPs at the links in the description down below. Thanks for watching, have a wonderful day, we'll see you tomorrow.